Good morning, everyone. My name's Chris Heiss. I'm the Executive Director of Good Grief, and I have the pleasure of welcoming you to the 2026 Good Grief Spring Institute. Whether you've been with us for years or are joining us for the first time, we are grateful to be in this space together. Today's March 14th, which the math teachers in the room will tell you is a day to recognize the mathematical constant pi, the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter. Besides being a wonderful day for pie lovers like myself to grab a slice, it struck me that Pi Day has special significance for us here today. At Good Grief, we speak of the power of holding space, creating an environment where children, parents, and caregivers can share their grief openly, without judgment, pressure, or expectation. You, our facilitators, make that space possible. You show up, you listen, you guide. You create the trust and safety that allow families to navigate their grief in community rather than in isolation. That work is transformative. As we learn early on in our training to be a facilitator, you strive to be the crust, giving participants the space to remember that their loss is real, their feelings are valid, and they are not alone. We build something with these families that is better together than the sum of its parts, kind of like a pie, and help them rediscover moments of connection, hope, and resilience. Today, we also celebrate a full circle moment, being joined by Donna Schuurman, who trained our first Good Grief volunteers almost 2 decades ago. That's that picture there on the bottom right. Donna's training was that first spark applied to the small bundle of tinder that bloomed into the community of care that has warmed our communities for nearly 2 decades. We're so lucky to have Donna here today when we gather to renew our own spark. As Mr. Rogers once said, we just don't get to be competent human beings without a lot of different investments from others. I want to take a moment to recognize our Good Grief board members who have joined us today. Got our board chair, Paul, sitting there in the front. Kim Ings, Kate Neely, Jody Stowe, Sarah Levin Goodstein. Guy Langford's back there somewhere. And I don't think Tiffany's right there. And Kim Kohler. Your leadership, dedication, and vision continue to strengthen our mission and ensure the strength of our community. Thank you. We have a few amazing friends from other organizations that have also benefited from Donna's Spark. Lindsay and Veronica from Imagine are here in the room. And we've got some folks from Bereavement who got to come through training with us as well. Thank you for being a part of this special day. Also, welcome to everyone here taking a Saturday to learn and build your skills in grief and trauma. We've developed amazing content for you, and I hope you will leave here not only with skills that benefit your personal and professional life, but with a deeper appreciation for the work that Good Grief does. And finally, as I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off this morning, thank you to all of the Good Grief staff and volunteers who spent so much time to put this event together, including months of meetings trying to figure out the agenda and the schedule and the website systems, and all the volunteers who are here making sure that the program goes off without a hitch. Anything that goes a little weirdly, just come talk to me. It's my fault. They did all the good stuff here. So before we begin today's sessions, I want to pause again to say thank you. Thank you for your time, for your compassion, and for your unwavering commitment to this work. The impact you make is immeasurable. Now, I get the distinct pleasure of getting to introduce Dr. Donna Schuurman. Dr. Donna Schuurman is the Senior Director of Advocacy and Education at Dougy Center. Dr. Schuurman has served the Dougy Center in various capacities since 1986 and was their Executive Director from 1991 to 2015. An internationally recognized authority on grief and bereaved children, teens, and families, Dr. Schuurman has written extensively on topics related to children who are grieving and has worked directly with families and communities impacted by large-scale tragedies and natural disasters, including the Oklahoma City bombing, Japan's Great Hanshin earthquake, the 9/11 attacks, the Tohoku earthquake, and the Sandy Hook school shootings. Please join me in welcoming Donna to the stage.
Well, today may be Pi Day. Does anybody know what tomorrow is? The Ides of March. Yes, beware the Ides of March. It also happens to be my 35th anniversary as an employee of the Dougy Center, and I am still beware the Ides of March. It's really an honor to be here. I grew up, or actually failed to grow up, in Levittown, Pennsylvania. So I'm a little bit of a local kid, another Levittowner maybe. Okay, we can talk later. And what I really want to share with you is some of what I have taken from the families that I've had the opportunity and privilege to work with over 35 years. Dougy Center, I think we're in our 43rd year. So I came in as a volunteer and a board member and joined the staff 35 years ago. And I want to share some things that I learned from the children and also from the adults. I want to start with a couple of questions, and feel free to raise your hand if you wish to, and if you don't, that's okay too. How many of you have experienced the death of someone in your life that mattered to you? Okay, I think all of us. I don't use significant person because I think all people are significant. I don't use loved one because they're not all loved. They're semi-loved, hated, whatever. It's great for fundraising to call all deceased people loved ones. But I have had kids say from time to time, I'm actually glad my dad's dead. He was mean to us, he beat us up, and my life is better now. And we need to make that space available also, and not blanket everyone who is deceased as a loved one. Fortunately, it's been a minority. I know with a group of this number, there have to be some of us who are actively grieving. How many of you have had a death that has impacted you in the last year? Okay, a lot of us. How about the last month? Okay. The last week? Okay. 2 weeks? Week? Okay. So I hope that what I'm sharing will touch your hearts and recognize also that a lot of us are grieving actively. And the question now I want to start with is, and this is very personal, so don't, feel free to not raise your hand. How many of you have ever been a child? Okay. Now, I see some of you not admitting that, but it's okay. Ursula Le Guin, who actually was a Portlander, Portland, Oregon. I had the privilege of meeting her before she died, and she dedicated her house as a space for writers. And she wrote the only science fiction book I've ever read that I liked. It's called The Left Hand of Darkness. Highly recommend it. The daily routine of most adults is so heavy and artificial that we're closed off to much of the world. We have to do this in order to get our work done. I think one purpose of art is to get us out of those routines. When we hear music or poetry or stories, the world opens up again. We're drawn in or out, and the windows of our perception are cleansed, as William Blake said. The same thing can happen when we're around young children or adults who have unlearned those habits of shutting the world out. One of my favorite things to do is hang out with 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds. I regularly sub for our littles group, which is 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. And I just love having them educate me about their worlds. Follow them around, sit with them, just wait till they tell us what they want to tell us and show us what they want to show us. And the first lesson that I learned is that our stories matter. Everybody in this room has a story. And though I don't know most of you, I do know some things that we all have in common. One is we all come from a long line of dead people. Every one of us. And those dead people, some of whom we met and some of whom we haven't met, have shaped us, sometimes in ways we recognize and sometimes in ways we haven't recognized. And I think the importance of story, indigenous cultures know this really well. Tell me that story again. What's the story of the beginning of the world? What's the story of your life? And I like to say to people, don't hang out with people who don't want to hear your story, whatever that is. Don't hang out with people who said, you already told me that. Like, what? I can't say the same thing twice? Particularly for those of us who want to be lifelong learners, sometimes when we say things out loud or communicate them through art or other expressions, forms of expression, we learn, oh, I didn't realize that until I just heard myself say it. Or the caring that someone gives to you can evoke from you things you didn't realize were kind of pulled up inside of you. And I learned this very quickly. This is me in I can't remember now, 79, I want to say, in Sakeo refugee camp in Thailand, Cambodian refugee camp. And I was there in December of 79, and it was in October of 79, actually before some of you were born, when the Cambodian refugees poured into Thailand. And we're in these refugee camps. This particular one had over 100,000 people in it who didn't know what had happened to any of their family members because of the Pol Pot regime. I was 24 years old, and I was sent by the organization I worked with in Chicago to these camps, and spent several weeks just walking around the camps with a young Cambodian woman who was about my age, who also didn't know where any of her family members were. And we walked around that camp, and then I went to the Vietnamese boat people camps in Hong Kong, and we did the same thing. And what struck me then, and also strikes me now, is that these are people who have experienced massive trauma, collective trauma, individual trauma, cultural trauma, and not one person said, I don't want to talk to you. I thought that there would be people who were like, I can't talk about it. But we wandered around the camp, and the whole point of what we were doing is literally sitting down with people and saying, who are you? What happened? What's going on now? And is there anything you want to tell us about what your life has been like, or who you miss, or any of those things? And I want to say something about the fields of traumatology, the discipline of traumatology, and the field of thanatology, the study of death, dying, and bereavement based on the god of death, Thanatos. Traumatology has done a better job of helping people, I believe, because a couple decades ago, traumatologists realized instead of collecting negative symptoms about what people were experiencing, they learned to ask, what happened to you? And by and large, thanatology is still asking people, what's wrong with you? As opposed to what happened to you. And I think that's a very different thing when you are trying to be present. So, some of the big lessons from the little chairs. Kids understand a lot more than adults think they do. How many times have you seen on the news somebody holding a child? Maybe there's been a fire, there's been something, and they're like, yeah, they don't know what's going on. And they're right there. I've had people come into groups, parents, especially after suicide deaths, and say, my son doesn't know that his father took his life in his car. We just told him it was a car accident. And the child comes into the group and says, my dad killed himself in his car, but don't tell my mom, she thinks it was an accident. They're perceiving, if we as adults learned as many new words and things every day that an average 2-year-old learns, we'd all be geniuses. And what are the two things I think 2-year-olds are particularly known for? One is a question, one is a statement that I think are preparing them for life. So what's the statement first? Then we'll get to the question. What are 2-year-olds well known? It's just one word. No. Right? They're preparing for life. No, this is hard. I can't handle this. And what's the question they ask? Why? I mean, isn't that the essence of a lot of life? No, why? Especially when a death occurs or anything that happens to us that is challenging, traumatic, painful. No. You get that news, you have cancer. You get that news, someone is dead. No. And then why and how? But they know a lot more than we think they do. I'm going to show a very brief video of some children playing at Dougy Center. And I think this is the video where there's a little girl, Maya, who people that I've shown this to say, just warn us a little bit. Like, she's just very impactful. So that's your warning.
Through younger children, we do see how much what they're wondering about comes out through their play.
Hello, who are you today? What's your name?
Amaya.
And how old are you? 3.
I wanted to sing ABC with my mom, and then my mom stopped singing, and then her body stopped singing.
So her mom stopped singing and her body stopped singing.
Then she died. Then I was crying, and it was not good. I have a bad feeling.
A bad feeling when that
Yeah.
happened?
Could you hear that? Okay, yeah. I have a bad feeling. We say that a lot now because we've seen Maya's video so much, but I'll be doing something and I'll just like channeling her. I have a bad feeling. Our grief is not a problem to be solved. I think I might say some things today, hopefully nothing that offends anybody, but that you may or may not disagree with. And that's okay. I'm adding my perspective to things. But if we look at grief as a problem to be solved rather than a life experience that all of us, I hope it's no surprise to anybody, like we're all in the queue. We all will die someday. And when we die, I can't speak for you, but I will say for myself, when I die, I want people to be sad. I want them to miss me. I want them to remember me. And yet our children are still being told things like, you need to put that behind you, as well as adults. You need to stop grieving. You need to take the pictures down. You need to change the room. Who are all these people who are giving us advice about how we individually, collectively, community handle our grief? We're not problems to be solved. Here's some words from
In the future, I hope my grief feels, well, I honestly hope it's still there because I feel like it would be crude not to grieve for someone who, was there for like 7-8 years of your life. No, wait, more than that. 10 to 9 years? Yeah.
In the future, I hope my grief feels like it's still there, because I can't forget. It makes me strong and helps me remember my dad.
In the future, I really hope that I'll be able to understand what happens and help myself go through this hard time.
In the future, I hope my grief feels somewhat the same, for it not to be completely silenced, but a small whisper and not getting in the way.
I hope my grief kind of stays the same, I guess, because without these feelings, I feel like I'd feel empty, and I don't want to feel empty.
In the future, I hope I feel the same way but still remember him for who he was and all the good memories we had together.
Another lesson that I have learned is that we all, children and all of us, react to and adapt to, in varying ways, the world around us. And going back to thanatology, or the whole paradigm of probably my least favorite book on earth is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. I know a lot of people who have to use it for their work. It doesn't mean we still shouldn't try to fight it. And I have friends who are like, well, we just have to accept it. And I'm like, yeah, that's what they said about slavery and racism. It's how it is. No, we have to change systems that are destructive to people. And I really think this whole glossary of everything that could possibly be wrong with you, one of the newer things in there is caffeine use disorder, which I clearly have and I'm proud of. But the idea that everything is a psychiatric problem that needs to be solved without truly looking at the full context. So the Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, mental disorders, it's in your head. And it's absent what is going on around you. There's lip service to it, but it's really absent that. And they actually, the American Psychiatric Association recently put out a press release that they are considering changing the name of it. I know this sounds like a joke, but it's not. They're looking at changing it from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders to the Diagnostic and Scientific Manual of Mental Disorders, which is really amusing because the biggest criticism of the DSM is that it's not scientific. It's consensual. So people sit around and they say, let's decide what we're going to call this mental disorder. And I've heard it described by some people as horse trading. I'll give you your term if you give me mine. And anyway, the whole idea that we grieve absent the circumstances we're in, who's with us, who's not with us. I was telling Pam this morning on our drive here, I met with 10 of the parents whose children were killed in the Sandy Hook school shootings 29 days after those murders. And one of the things I was asked by a Rotary group, if I had the opportunity to raise it when I was meeting with them, they had raised money that they wanted to give to the family, and they're trying to find a specific thing to target it for. So they asked me if it was appropriate to ask if they could use money from the Rotary gift to pay for car rentals or hotels or food for people who came to help them, family and friends who came to help them. And you know how energy can just change in a room? It was like, there was a time and it turned into a 3.5-hour meeting because they got sharing with each other and it just took, 3.5 hours went by. And I asked that question and the room kind of changed in energy. And one of the dads looked up and said, would they give us money to send them home? And that led to a long discussion about how everybody was trying to help in ways that weren't helpful. One of the dads said to his brother-in-law, your relentless need to make me feel better is killing me. Let me feel bad. My daughter was just gunned down, my 6-year-old, in her classroom. Don't try to make me feel better. Let me feel bad. And it seems so hard for so many of us to do. I want to show a little clip that is from the University of Washington. It was part of a study there. This is a 15-month-old child. He was one of 150 in an experiment that they did, that they had permission from the parent or parents to look at how they responded when something happened, which you'll see in a minute what happens.
There's something inside. Can you see what's inside the box? You can take the lid off. Is there something in there? There's a green comb. I'm going to put it back inside the box and put the lid back on the box and close it up. Can I see that? Thank you. Let's see what else we have. Look at this. See? Look at this. There. Hi, Teresa. I'm going to sit here and read a magazine. Okay. That's Kelly. Kelly's going to sit and read a magazine. Kelly, look at this.
That's aggravating. That's so annoying.
Oh, I thought it was really interesting.
Well, that's just your opinion. It's aggravating.
Yeah. Can I see that? Thank you.
I'm gonna go now, Teresa.
Kelly's going bye-bye. Kelly went bye-bye.
So in this study with 150 children of that age, they're finding, I'll just read the finding, they can monitor what you do, think about, plan, and regulate their own actions accordingly. The interesting thing is that they can do all this without the help of language. They were too young to speak in sentences. But I mean, clearly this child is reacting to everything that is happening around him. And when we don't recognize how much what we do or fail to do for children, young children, but older children, they're watching us to see what the norms are and how they should respond. Another lesson, if you pay attention, you can learn a lot from our questions and our play. I have a very strong memory years ago of playing with a boy in our hospital room. And he informed me, I'm the doctor, you're my patient. And I just waited. And, doctor, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? I'm waiting to see how I respond. And he said, well, first of all, you have a broken leg. So I grab my leg. Oh, my leg. And he says, not that one. You know, it's the other leg. The need to have control of something when you feel helpless. I know, for example, when my kitchen drawers I'm organizing them, that something is going on that I feel out of control. I just know, like, whoa, wait a minute, what's going on? That when I feel out of control, I need to control something. So we can learn a lot from following their play. So Dougy Center is not a curriculum-driven, it's a participant-driven program. Families come every other week for an hour and a half for their groups. They can stay for 4 years if they want to. The average length of time is about 18 to 24 months for our families. But we're giving them that choice. You can stay here as long as you need to. It's up to you to decide when that is time for you to go. I love this. It should be noted that children at play are not playing about. Their games should be seen as their most serious-minded activity. That's a photo on the left of our hospital room. And I will say that one of the things that happens in the hospital room is the children almost never want to be a patient. They put other kids or the adults in the hospital bed because they want control. They want to be able to control something. The picture on the right is the brother. In this photo, he's 3 years old. His brother, Ryan, died at 5 days old. And his mother had been telling him, "You're going to have a baby brother. You're going to get to play together. It's going to be so exciting and fun." And then 5 days old, Ryan dies. And he didn't fully understand death. "I know, Dad, but when's he coming back? When will I see him?" And his mother had the idea to build this sand tray on his gravesite. And Ryan would go there and play, as you see him playing there, and talk to his brother and explain his day to him and say, "I'm sorry I never got to hold you. I miss you." We can miss people we never met. Big lesson from Little Chair. Don't assume you know what I'm wondering. Ask. I have a neighbor. He's now 22. Jackson, his name is, and I met him when he was 2. He was bald, and I was bald because I was going through chemotherapy for cancer. And I didn't have any energy except to sit out front, and he would waddle by, and we'd make faces at each other. And his father, to this day, resents that he said Donna before he said Dada. But he came home from school one day and he says to his mom, "Why does Katie have 2 mommies?" And he's like first grade or so. And she's like, "Okay, here goes my politically correct explanation. Some kids have 2 mommies. Some kids have 2 daddies. Some kids only have 1 daddy or mommy, or some kids are raised by their grandma." Or she goes into this whole families look very different. And at the end of it, he says, "Well, I'm glad I don't have 2 mommies." And she's thinking, how did I fail in this explanation? And she says, "Why not, honey?" And he says, "Because I'd never get away with anything." So, she's answering something he isn't actually asking. And so just ask. And I think sometimes as adults, we think we have to have answers for everything. And "I don't know" is a great answer. I don't know why we die. That's how we got made. Like, if it was up to me, I would have made it differently, but it wasn't up to me. That's the 2 mommies slide. A big lesson from Little Chair. We're listening. We're listening to everything that you say. This is from a story my little neighbor across the street, Hazel, was told that my cat died. And she used to play with my cat. And she came over a couple days later and said, "Can I see Jasper?" And I looked at her mom like, "I thought you told her Jasper died." And she said, "Honey, remember I told you Jasper died?" And she said, "But I don't want him to be died." And I'm like, "Me either. I miss him. I loved him." And she asked if she could see his bowl. And I said, "He's in my heart. We have pictures, but he died. And we can't see him physically anymore." Weeks later, Hazel's in the car with her mom, and she says to her mom, "Mom, do stars have doors?" And her mom's like, "Do stars have doors? Where did that come from?" And she said, "Well, you told me Jasper was now in a star. And I was wondering if he's stuck in that star or if he can get out through a door. And my neighbor said to me, I had no idea I told her that. I just made something up. Like, oh, they're in the stars. And is that where I go when I die? Do I live in a star? Like what we say, they're conceptualizing and taking seriously. This idea of reflective listening is such a key thing. And it has helped me actually in my personal life as well as my professional life to reflect back what you hear someone say. You don't always have to you don't have to exactly parrot, but sometimes it's helpful to. I remember I was meeting with Dr. Edwin Schneidman. He was 92 years old at the time, considered kind of one of the modern founders of suicidology. And we were attempting to get an interview with him, truly, before he died, and honor him with an award. And he said, you can come with we had a date, we had a film crew, but he said, please call me that morning just to make sure that I'm feeling okay for this to happen. So my friend Ron calls him that morning and says, Dr. Schneidman, today is the day. How are you feeling? And he said, I'm feeling okay. And Ron said back to him, oh, I'm glad you're feeling well. So we'll be there at such and such time. And he said, wait. I didn't say I was feeling well. I said, I'm feeling okay. A stickler for words. He came up with the term postvention, what we do after a suicide death. He also talks about suicide as psych ache, an ache of the soul. It hasn't really infiltrated the language of suicidology as much as I think it should have, but the importance of being heard. And when someone's listening to you, right? Like you're talking to somebody. What are some of the things that happen that someone's listening? Loud. Okay, they nod. They ask relevant questions. Okay, they're making eye contact. That's cultural too. Sometimes, like, you don't want to make them feel like you're an FBI investigator, but you also don't want to be looking away while they're talking. So we know, you feel it when someone is. This is an illustration of reflective listening. This is, some of you may have seen this, Kingston with his dad, and his dad is actually a comedian. They're watching the last episode of the show Empire and commenting in their own language about what they're seeing. But just pay attention to how dad is reflecting little Kingston.
Okay. They need to work on that, right? Yes, okay. Did you understand it though? No. All right. Oh, no, not this one. This is the green finale of this one. Yeah, that's the next one. I said I was wondering. I don't know what they're gonna do next season because they did some stuff this time. Exactly what I was thinking. Oh yeah. You're right. Don't bring that in. You know what I'm saying? Don't do the same stuff. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, that's like that. Yeah. Like go somewhere else with that, but don't bring it here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's what I said. They was like, you know what I'm saying? What in the world? Don't do it here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Really? I thought the same thing. We think a lot alike, huh? Oh, that's crazy. Right.
One of the best illustrations that I'd seen of reflective listening. And interesting here, too, that the word listen contains the same letters as the word silent. Like we should maybe listen more than we are speaking. So we all still have our child inside of us, no matter how old we are. Our early childhood experiences have shaped us. They don't define us necessarily, but they do shape us. Now, some lessons from the big chairs. Caregivers need support, especially when they're grieving. Some of you may have heard, and I have to make sure, I'm not sure if I'm on the right slide here, but some of you may have heard about how a drug called naltrexone is being field tested trials for people who are addicted to grief. How many of you have heard about this? Not a few. Okay, well, there's a theory out there. I can't go into it too much, but it's based on a study of 23 women. I'll actually come back to it in a minute. Who had a mother or sister die of breast cancer. And half of the women, well, not exactly half because it's 23, 12 and however many, 13, something like that, 11, thank you. I never said I was a statistician. Half of them had what they called complicated grief, and the other 11 didn't have complicated grief. And how they measured that is through an inventory called the Inventory of Complicated Grief. It's a 19-question inventory. You can Google it and get it. It's a horrible inventory. It's still being used. It was developed in 1999 with 350 white widows from San Diego County whose husbands had died 6 to 8 weeks prior to them filling out this 19-question inventory. And it is still being used. In fact, one of the founders of it in 2016 published an article about naltrexone saying it's probably time for us to revisit the Inventory of Complicated Grief to see if it's applicable to other populations. Well, there's nothing wrong with being a white widow from San Diego County, average age 65, whose husbands died. There's nothing wrong with that. But does that population represent other populations? And it's still being just translated into all kinds of other languages as ways to evaluate whether you have complicated grief. So anyway, that's what they did with these women. And they showed them pictures of their deceased mother or sister and put them through functional magnetic resonance imaging machines. How many of you ever been in one of those machines? It's like bong, 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 bong. So they showed the picture of that, and then they looked at their nucleus accumbens. They looked at how their brain activity was happening and concluded that because the women who had complicated grief, their nucleus accumbens stayed lit up longer than the women who didn't. They concluded that those women were addicted to grief, that they were not letting go of their deceased mother or sister. And I will come back to that with a quote from someone who asks a very good question. So when you are caregiving and also grieving, it's a dynamic experience. It's not just what's happening in your own head. It can be exhausting, confusing, painful, lonely, stressful, anxiety-inducing, life-affirming, much more. I actually think even after all of these years, and I really am I was an English major, I think language is so important because capturing the right words can help us communicate better. But I think grief is almost not capturable in words. It's so visceral. So that's why we use a lot of metaphors when we talk about grief. Or we scream, or we sob, because grief is not easily capturable in words. We need a strengths-based, not a symptoms-based approach. And again, I go back to the naltrexone study, these 20 some women, whatever it was, and how they were told that they needed to let go and disconnect their connection to their mother or sister because they were addicted to grief. And that led to these field trials that are currently happening with naltrexone, which is used for opioid and alcohol addiction, because they're yearning too deeply. That's the bad thing. The bad thing is yearning too deeply. And one of the, not side effects, one of the main implications of naltrexone is it reduces your interest in social bonding. And it's indiscriminate. So it reduces your interest in opioids, but it also reduces your interest in people or pretty much anything. It just kind of makes you not care. And we all know that social bonding, when you're grieving, is critically important, whether you're 3 years old, 8 years old, 30, 80 years old. Because a lot of what we hear about in groups is not just the response of what it's like to have seen our parent or our sibling die, but also how people are reacting and responding to us in ways that are helpful, ways that are hurtful. Almost all of our kids, middle school age, high school kids, and adults can say, I lost friends after my person died, or I found out who my friends really were. I found out who really was there for me. I found out who could listen to my stories. And we need to take a strengths base. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, which is used by insurance companies to reimburse clinicians for treatment, is completely symptoms based. It's all the things that could be wrong with you. And we need to be looking at what is helping you. One of my mentors, Phyllis Silverman, said if the language we use is of illness, then typically we want to seek a cure. We talk about grief in terms of symptoms, closure, getting over it, healing, and recovery. These words that we use all the time are the language of illness. There is no penicillin that will make grief all better. It is not an illness or condition from which one recovers. And in 2012, when the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorder came out with its 5th edition, ultimately, now there's one called TR, Text Revised, 5th edition. It included a new mental disorder called prolonged grief disorder. And ironically, when it was up for discussion on the DSM website for months for people to comment on it before it was approved, they misspelled prolonged. They spelled it pronged. And so a friend of mine and I were doing a spoof on cutlery, like forks, pronged grief, and sometimes it has 4 prongs. And anyway, it came in. And one of the symptoms is just, I think there are like 12 symptoms and you have to have X number of them. One of them is avoiding places you used to go with the deceased. Well, maybe you're avoiding them because nobody's asking you to go there anymore. You're not a part of a couple anymore. Or you had a child die as if that's contagious and people are avoiding you. A lot of the families that I've worked with, and I'm also on the board of Compassionate Friends, the national program, in its 50th year or 51st year for adults or parents who had a child die at any age, is how people avoid them because they don't know what to say. And they actively see people avoid them. And the key factor of this whole naltrexone study, the addiction to grief, but the key symptom is yearning. You're yearning too deeply. And I think I can say this to this group. I'm a recovering Baptist, and I am going to do a whole serious presentation as a spoof about religion and prolonged grief disorder, because Christianity, every person who would call themselves a Christian, they're addicted to Jesus. Like, you need to take the pictures down. You need to stop waiting for him to come back. He's dead. I had my massage therapist was telling me he used to be a minister, but he lost his faith and now he's a massage therapist. And he had a client who came in and she was sobbing and she said her only son died. And he said, well, do you have any religious, spiritual tradition? She said, yeah, I went to my pastor. It wasn't very helpful. He wasn't very helpful. And he's like, well, what did he say? And he said, God lost his only son too. And the woman says back, yeah, for a long weekend. So, just some of the things we say, every cloud has a silver lining. No, it doesn't. Not even scientifically. So grief is more than an individual experience. There's no finish line. It's not like there's a magical ending somewhere. I think it was Voltaire who said, only the shallow know themselves. There's always more to understanding our parents or our caregivers, why they did the things they did in context of who they were and what the world was like at that time. And we can always be growing. My mother had, her first child died at 5 days old. Her name was Lynn. She was named Lynn. And my mother, at the end of her life, and she lived to be 91 and a half, died November 15th of 2020 during the pandemic. So I couldn't be there with her. I couldn't see her. I have 2 older brothers. One of them died exactly 6 months later to the day of COVID-19. And people would come to me and say things like, I'm so over this COVID thing. And I'd be like, yeah, so is my brother. He's dead from it. Funny little story. This is a true story, though. My brother was in Atlanta in the hospital. He was in the hospital for about 6 weeks before he died. And I talked to him regularly. And he was getting good care. He was like, the nurses are really helpful. Toward the end, he was saying, I don't think I'm going to make it. My oxygen levels aren't going up. And if they take me off of oxygen, I'll die. And he did ultimately die. But the nurse who was with him told his wife at 3 o'clock in the morning, my brother Brad called the nurse's station and asked for a sandwich and a glass of water. And by the time she turned and got to the door, he was dead. And as soon as I heard that story, my very first thought was, he forgot to ask for it to go. And honestly, I know he would think that was funny, but one of the things that happened for me weeks later, I just had cravings for sandwiches. Like, I wanted a tuna sandwich. I wanted a ham sandwich. I wondered what kind of sandwich he wanted. It was like really odd because I'm not a huge sandwich person. Going back to this whole thing about people being addicted to grief, Jerry Adler, whose son Max died at the age of 20, read this report that these people are addicted to grief. And he, in New York Magazine, published this article called Crazy Sad. If you don't experience intense longing or yearning on more days than not for more than 12 months after the death of your own child, if you don't have a diminished sense of self, you have a problem that goes deeper than anything contemplated in the DSM. There are some things in life to which one should never hope to become adjusted. What families need from us are authentic presence, validation, and attention. That's what they need. They don't need us diagnosing them and being top down like we're the experts that will rain our wisdom on them. Every single person who walks into the Dougy Center, I look at as someone who can teach me something. I don't assume I know what they're going through. I don't assume anything about their relationship with the person or persons who died. I don't assume because of their age that they can do this or that or that they can't. There's also knowledge that grief is something to feel, not to fix. We're not here to fix people. We're here to companion them. We want to remind them that their stories matter, their person matters. I will tell one other very brief story because it's on my mind right now and I can't help. And we all are carrying these stories, but I feel compelled to do this. On February 25th of last month, a good friend of mine's son moved into a $44 million funded apartment complex in the Washington, D.C. area. 25 years old. Alex is his name. And he has severe autism. And he's also extremely intelligent, but socially very, very awkward. He has a really hard time understanding social connection. His father died when he was 12 in the military. This $44 million project opened in November, and Alex was accepted into it through a lottery. And he did the ribbon cutting at the opening of the ceremony. And he moved in on February 25th. And his mother, Jill, who's a psychologist and a friend of mine, was like, for the first time in my life, I can feel like Alex has the wraparound services that he needs. He'll be with other young adults who understand him. And on March 1st, he had a crisis that involved something that was happening online, and he was being extorted, actually, is what happened. He was being extorted, and somebody threatened him and said, I'm going to expose you as something that he isn't if you don't send money. And he panicked, and he called his mom, and she said, Alex, get off those sites. Don't go on those sites. Change your passwords. And he's like, no, I'm going to call the police. I got to report this. And also, Mom, I'm never going to be normal. I'm never going to be able to get married. I'm not going to drive a car, and struggling. And she's like, honey, we're coming over. We're 30 minutes away. We'll drive over. Don't call the police. They're not going to, scams happen all the time to everybody. They're not going to really be able to do anything. Hang up the phone. Alex does call the police. And he says, I'm being scammed. I'm scared. This is embarrassing. I have a knife. I might kill myself. So he calls for help. The police show up, 3 police officers. We don't know yet what they said. The body cams have not been released, but all 3, he was in the quad. He had the knife. He wouldn't drop the knife, and all 3 shot and killed him. Alex Lamoure, Lamoire. It is already national news and international news, especially in the autism community. But I'm still kind of reeling from it. March 1st, and it's on my mind. It's in my body. It's like I feel like I'm not fully present. So if for any reason my remarks didn't track, I hope they did in some way. But I am carrying that loss of Alex and his mother. And I know all of us are carrying losses in this room. So I want to thank you for being here, for all the things that you do in your personal lives, in your volunteer work, in your whatever work you're doing to better support and help understand children and their families who are grieving, because our society still does not do a very good job of it. So thank you so much.